Yo, check it out. This is Bryan from TheBeeshine.com, and you're watching Revolutionary TV. I never thought of the idea for TheBeeshine until after I had been doing video for a while. So what happened was I was working at this sales company in South Jersey, and I won a flip cam. It was like a raffle from one of the vendors. And so I wanted to make use of it. And prior to that, I didn't really care about doing anything with video. And I just wanted to do something that was kind of like people watching, or something that would get in the minds of people and figure out why they do the things they do or how they think. So I came up with all different ideas, such as, like, you know, what inspires somebody to be who they are and do what they do on a daily basis. Or, you know, I was gonna document girls talking about, like, their breakup stories and, you know, what was going in their heads, or, you know, even talk to homeless people and ask them, you know, about their story and how they got into the situations that they're in. So I always wanted to do something along that lines, really just kind of getting inside the minds of people. And what had happened was I started on one idea, which was the whole what inspires, and I was doing it with my friends, and I knew some, like, local rappers and things like that. And as I started meeting more and more people, I was getting referrals, and people were saying, oh, I could hook you up with this artist and this artist. And I didn't think that was, you know, that you could reach these artists that I grew up listening to. And once I figured out, you know, that I could, and I was able to connect with some of them, I was like, wow, this is incredible. I have to do more. And, you know, it just went from there. So like I said before, how I first started connecting with artists was just through my local network in South Jersey and Philadelphia area. But I knew that, you know, my favorite artists and some of the best artists on the East Coast were from New York City. So I had to go up there and interview those artists, at least to get a foundation going where I could use that to, you know, build my credibility that I was interviewing the right people. So I would, you know, drive up on a weeknight to a show in Brooklyn or, you know, Manhattan somewhere. And, you know, I would try to talk to the artists when they weren't on stage, or if I could get backstage, or, if I was, you know, seeing them outside, and I would just ask them to do, like, quick, you know, 1-minute interviews on their inspirations. And I was able to do that before having any type of resume with, like, Immortal Technique and, Large Professor and MOP. And that was, like, that was really cool to me to see that they were very, you know, friendly and easy to get them to do the interview by just, you know, asking them nicely. I think what makes the TheBeeshine interviews stand out more than any other interview platform is that I'm really trying to get inside the artist's head about who they are as a person and understand, you know, where they came from, like what their upbringing was as far as hearing hip hop and their reference point to being involved in the culture as early back as they can remember, and how they developed as an artist, as far as what really hit them to make them want to do music for a career. And once I start finding that out, you know, I'll ask about their family and how they felt, and I'll ask about, you know, some of their favorite moments, why they like being an artist, things like that. It's a lot of questions that I feel most people don't ask. And so that's the differentiating factor for me. I wouldn't be interested in doing it if I was doing the same thing that everyone else was doing. So as soon as that happens, I lose interest, and I probably will just move on to do something else. But I definitely like the fact that I'm doing it very uniquely, and there are artists that, you know, after the fact, they see the interviews and they say it was, you know, one of their favorite interviews that they've ever done, or most personal interviews, or, you know, I always get people, you know, saying to me, like, wow, that was a really good question, or nobody's ever asked me that before. And to me, that's a really good feeling. There is one story I remember when I was interviewing the Tats crew, which is an early graffiti crew in the 80s. And one of the members, Nicer, I was talking to him, and he was giving me a really, really good, descriptive, thorough interview about, you know, graffiti art and how he was, you know, bombing and things like that. And I asked him to kind of take me through, like, the experience of what it was like as a kid when he, I think maybe the first time or one of the first few times that he went out bombing on the train yard. And, that's something that not a lot of people are familiar with, what that experience is like. So I asked him to kind of walk me through like the adrenaline and, just the whole adventure of, getting your paint ready and going out at night and having to look behind your, look behind your back and, watch out for the cops or other crews tagging out there. And it was a really, really interesting story. It definitely can be expanded upon a lot more than just an interview. But that was something that I thought was really special that he was able to share. So once I realized that I was able to reach and interview a lot of these artists, whether it was DJs or MCs or B-boys or graph artists, I set a goal to interview some of my favorite artists or some of my favorite rappers from the 90s, because I was most knowledgeable about MCs, more so than DJs. So I started coming up to New York more and more. Actually, I moved up to New York in 2012, and I was able to just go to a lot more events and meet a lot of people and start interviewing. What happened was I was learning as I went along, because I didn't know much of the 80s rappers. Maybe, from 88 on I was familiar with, but before that, or a lot of artists from that era, I wasn't that familiar with. So even to this day, I'm still learning as I go along. So I was at this show at Le Poisson Rouge in Manhattan, and I was there. There was a Slick Rick show with Nice and Smooth, and I think I was there just to kind of get some footage of the show. I had met there. I was introduced to Tito from the Fearless Four, and I was introduced to LA Sunshine from the Treacherous Three. And I although I wasn't that familiar with the individuals from the group, I knew the group names: Fearless Four, Treacherous Three, Furious Five, all that. And I was like, wow, like you guys are from these groups from the 80s. Like I totally know about them. So that to me was like really cool. And then I was like, I need to hear what they have to say about, hip hop, because they were there when it first started. So, I got a little bit from each of them, only because my interviewing, my questions weren't that thorough. I wasn't really prepared, but I just wanted to talk about, some of their inspirations. And my vision or focus gravitated more towards the old school from that point on. And I was like, wow, this is really, really cool that we can talk about the earliest part of hip hop, basically how it started, how it got formed. And I think that's really interesting, and it's really important to do that, because a lot of these pioneers are, in their 40s and 50s, which is amazing for the fact that hip hop is one of the only music genres that the pioneers are still around. Like, you can't do that with rock and roll. You can't really do that with jazz. It started so long ago that, I almost feel like an obligation to interview as many artists, as many early pioneers as possible to cover different perspectives of the culture and get all these stories that we can, eventually do a timeline from different perspectives, different regions, whether it be Harlem, Bronx, Brooklyn, Queens, Manhattan, and really hear from each person about what their reference point was in the beginning, when they first started seeing people rapping on the corners or, doing shows and doing tours, which were only out to like Connecticut or something like that, because that's as far as you could really go in the 80s. So to me, it's incredible that, I can document the very early beginnings of hip hop from the people that were there, and they can share the stories and really tell it how it is. And it dispels a lot of myths about hip hop, as far as like why we call hip hop, or why we call emceeing, and what a DJ is really here to do. and the DJ being like the backbone of the group. Like, you couldn't have a group without a DJ. You couldn't have the music without a DJ. And it's almost like backwards now. But the fact that I'm able to hear how it first started and how it originated, and then share it with everybody, because it's not about me telling the story. It's not about me being like a journalist and telling everybody what hip hop was like. I'm just providing a camera that I'm letting everyone else tell it from the people who were there. So I think that's really cool that I'm able to do that. And most of the time, people are willing to share their stories too. After somebody watches one of the interviews that I've done, I really want them to take away like, wow, this was a really interesting interview. You know, no matter who it was that they were watching being interviewed, whether it was an artist that they knew or they didn't know, I just want them to be like, wow, this person was really interesting. Because you could look at somebody, and I know a lot of people that would just look at people, you know, dressed quote unquote hip hop, whatever, and they would just think a certain way about them. And it's not the case at all. And in fact, most of the times, you know, your first perception of somebody on how they dress is wrong. So I really want people to just watch these interviews and learn something from everybody and hear about, you know, each person's, whether it be their upbringing or, you know, their influences or just interesting things that they've been through and experienced in their life. Just be able to take away something that they never knew before, whether it be about that person or hip hop or the culture or the music or anything like that. For anybody that's trying to start their own hip hop blog and conduct interviews, you know, the best advice I would give is to just do it and then figure it out as you go along. I feel like most people with anything they do, not this, but just any idea, business idea, hobby, whatever it is, you know, people wait for the right moment or the perfect moment or the right answers, and that those may not even exist. There may never be a perfect moment because we all have such busy schedules and there's always a distraction or an excuse. So I would say just start doing something and you'll figure out if you like it or if you don't like it. And if you don't like it, then you're one step closer to finding something that you do like. And then if you do like it, but you think you can improve and you're not that good at it, then you'll improve and you'll get better. Years later, I hope TheBeeshine has an impact of being a time capsule for memories and for stories and for experiences, for the people that were around in this time, and something to look back on, you know, decades later, that we can understand who these people were and what type of people they were and their personalities and all that cool stuff beyond their music. Because most of us only form opinions about people based on their music or what we see them say or do on TV. But the fact that I can provide like these one-on-one interviews, candid interviews where I feel like I can, you know, be relaxed enough and make the artist feel comfortable enough to open up and really show us like who they are and how they feel about things and what type of person they are. I think that's really important. Another big thing that I like doing is showing people why we love hip hop so much. With some of the questions that I ask artists, I'm trying to get them to evoke a feeling or an emotion and express what it's like to do this, what it's like to make music, what it's like to rap about certain things that they rap about and being able to express it, and maybe even being able to have their music as a vehicle to get them into a better situation in their life. But I think what I'm also trying to do is help people understand that aren't familiar with hip hop why we love it so much and why it's so impactful and the fact that it has changed the world. And, you know, corporations and Disney movies are including like rap battles in it, but they don't give the credit back to us. But, you know, in any regard, that's like the biggest thing for me is to get people that don't like hip hop or don't, care about it for one reason or another, not to get them to like hip hop, but to understand how it makes us feel and how positive that it is when the positivity isn't in the forefront. So yeah, I hope it has that kind of impact as well as just kind of sharing history, since, the 70s and 80s.